All right, we'll get started. We'll let people continue to join us, of course. Thanks everybody for being on today. Remember, as you think about the interaction today, that we have these webinars for you really to also talk to each other. If you have issues that are going on in your district, that you would like feedback from other board members and how they might handle it, um, raise your hand, throw it in a chat. Like, we really want this to be the issues that you think are relevant to you. Um, and we try to fill that space in kind of around that, but we want you to hear from us about the issues that are important to you and from each other. So I want to touch on a few issues. First, I would say if you have not, and this is, we probably have some superintendents on as well. If you have not filled out MASB's member survey, please do so. Right now we're at about 396 as I'm looking at it. We definitely want to get higher numbers than that. And it is, we use it to help in our strategic planning process. We use it to help look at what are the things that we might be not offering that you want to see offered. We look at it for a number of reasons. And so I would just say, please, if you can, fill it out just to give us feedback. We really appreciate that. And then I would say, I guess through a show of virtual hands, I wonder how many of you were able to make it to the Spring Institute. So let's throw up some virtual hands and some real ones. Okay, a handful of people. So, um, the topic for the conference or for the institute was AI, and I'm interested in creating a little bit of a conversation here, just to like from MASB's perspective. One, we want to know how we might be able to help you more in the AI space. Maybe it's just what we did at the institute is continuing to put people in front of you that are in the AI world and can help share what's going on in other school districts. And you might be able to be prompted by that and bring back questions to your district. Um, and if there's other ways that you think that we might be able to help, I think please share that. But I would be interested in, as we learned at the Institute, particularly, the organization that I would say that's bringing the most expertise to the conversation right now in Michigan is Michigan Virtual. And they've got people out in districts on a daily basis, facilitating and helping districts get to new places on AI. But um, for what we learned from them, or one of the many things, was that we have districts that have engaged with their boards. Their boards are not the ones out there doing a bunch of AI work, but they're engaged and understand how it's impacting their district. They understand um, where it might be being used in curriculum areas or in other operational function areas within your district. And if a citizen were to come up and ask them questions, like they would be able at least to give them some answer. And then we have districts where there's no knowledge at the board level and maybe really very little at the staff level. So we run the spectrum of people where you are as districts in AI. And I'm just interested from people here that are willing to share where you are in the AI journey within your district. Have you had a conversation at the board table? What was that conversation like? Is it something that you're leaving to the superintendent, but the superintendent has updated you and said, here's what we're doing in the district? So I'd be interested if anybody has any experience in your district of what's going on and being able to share. Let's see. Oh, thanks for that, Kurt. Appreciate it. Um, oh, I appreciate that, Crystal. Yes, absolutely. using AI personally is something that even internally, I was just in a conversation yesterday with a staff member about like how do we try to lift up AI within the organization as well and use it more. But any people that are interested or that have had some conversations at their district level that want to just share with others what's happening in your district or maybe what's not?
I'll share. We have been able to send our elementary school assistant principal and some of our other staff to some tech conferences. They went to McCall, and they've been actively engaging, trying to figure out what tools do we want to invest in. And they are providing some recommendations. They came to our last board meeting to make sure to tell us what they're learning, what they're thinking, what staff are anticipating using it for. Side note on that, my doctorate's in educational technology, focus on AI. So I'm very much interested in that myself. But it's interesting to see some of the other districts I work with professionally, such a wide gamut. And some folks are starting to really invest and come around. Some folks have some great tools that they're already using, and sometimes the conversation is not there yet. So that's just where we're at.
Appreciate that, Nicole. And that is, you hear, and it was encouraging when we were talking about it. It might not have been during a session, but just over that weekend, I had this picture of school districts where if the board and the administration weren't doing anything in AI, that there was crickets out in the field. And clearly what was dispelled there is that there are likely teachers in your districts that are using AI, but they haven't been given permission to use AI. And so they're kind of in stealth mode. They might even be using it in their classrooms. They're using it personally. They might see a lot of opportunities for use in the classroom, but the district hasn't lifted it up to a conversational point yet. And so that made me at least, and that's logical that that would be happening. But I think from a board perspective, what it brings up is even having that conversation at the board table with your superintendent to be like, are we lifting up, like, are we looking for expertise within our own district that may already exist? And you just don't know that it's happening because they haven't been giving the green light to share. And I see one of our um, Barb posted and said our district has a task force formed, and that is one of the things that Justin from Michigan Virtual said would be one of the first things that you could do at a district was start a task force with your staff members and be start sharing ideas and talking about it. And so that's a great example, Barb, of what's going on in that space. And also to John, your point on the clearinghouse, that is something that has came up at the institute. There's a statewide work group right now on AI. I sit on one part on a communications part of it. Brad is sitting on the legal and policy part of it. We've been part of another one that's kind of brought this about for the past year, and that is one of the conversations we're having is the clearinghouse idea. How do you I mean, new products are coming out probably on a daily basis, but can we create an entity? And I don't know that who it is, if it's the Department of Ed, if it's Michigan Virtual, if it's something separate, um, that would give, some idea of, yes, districts are using this software or this program, and there's some safety factors involved, and you can feel comfortable using it. And so I think that is a hurdle to clear for local districts because they're fearful of opening up their networks to software and other systems that haven't been vetted in some real way. And it wouldn't surprise me also at our ISDs, there's a group called Metal that are the technology people across the state that they might end up being a good clearinghouse for something like that to be able to start sharing. But that's a really good thing that we're also hearing about is that idea of a clearinghouse. I'm looking to see. Oh, Sally, that's good. So you've had somebody already present to the board about getting staff to use approved apps. Oh, Mark, I'm glad that what our conversation was able to help. Um, yes, Jenna, Northville, and that this is not to deter or say anything else. But I would say, I mean, Northville, I would say is the district that's been held up as maybe an example of bringing the board in the appropriate way, engaging the board over multiple months about AI and continuously updating you. I thought the parent camp that you guys ran was a great idea. Um, and so, yeah, I like um, if people are interested and Jenna is willing, like pick her brain as she's on the chat and get contact information. I think Northville's really done a good job in that regard. And I would say, and I know I mentioned Brad is on the on part of the one of the task forces on through Michigan Virtual, and I said kind of the legal policy factor of it. Brad, what I know I think you've only had one or two meetings so far, but what are the issues that are coming up in your group?
Yeah, actually, we just had our subgroup meeting yesterday. So how the steering committee works, you have a overarching committee consisting of I don't know, about 60 to 70 people representing association, representing districts. And then you have subcommittees that focus on the following topics: leadership, policy, ethical, and legal considerations. That's the subcommittee I'm serving on. Instructional frameworks and assessment, professional development and student use, business and technology operations, and communications and community outreach. And then within those subcommittees, you have work groups, and I'm currently chairing a work group on ethical and legal considerations relating to AI. And just had our first meeting yesterday. Have some great representatives on that committee. Have an individual from the Michigan Education Association. Have two individuals from school districts and the technology departments. One from Southwest Michigan, one from the UP, and then we have an individual that actually is a superintendent of an area of Catholic schools in the Saginaw area. So a great diverse group to work with. And yeah, there were a number of issues that came up in our committee meeting yesterday. First and foremost, protecting the student data and privacy. That's going to be the kind of the biggest lift we have as a committee is providing guidance on protecting that student data and privacy. And then also, how AI relates to instruction and research. Best practices, relating to those matters. And another issue that comes into play, and this was talked about in the presentation we had up in Mackinac Island, is just the bias that you have with AI information, and having that information vetted to ensure that students are aware that information that they get through an AI search likely might have some bias in it as of today. Eventually, that may get worked out as we go forward. But those were just a few of the issues that we discussed, and there's going to be a policy side of it as well. That is a different subgroup, but clearly the legal and ethical subgroup will be working with the policy subgroup, and this is going to be a long process, but hopefully when we're done, maybe within the next year Michigan will be one of the leaders in terms of providing guidance to school districts in AI.
Thanks for that, Brad. And I
Yeah.
mean, that is, I think that I mean, the quandary for districts is so often as, I mean, education can be relatively slow to move, and that's okay. We're trying to protect kids and make sure that they're learning in safe environments. And in this case, we have a situation where it's technology that's going to move, that's moving so fast that that impacts our ability to put everything in its place and the right way with the right policies in advance of things doing it. And if you kind of wait too long, there's that well, like how far behind do we get? And so it is trying to figure out how can you have, and we have districts that are proving it every day that they're having the conversations internally, they're spending time making sure they're working with safe software because they've vetted it with other school people that have been using it as well. They've created task forces. They've brought their board into the conversation. Like there is definitely a way to do this alongside of the policy discussion that needs to happen. And in a safe way, as opposed to being like, as a district, we're not going to do anything until everything gets sorted out with state law and federal regulation and everything else. You will be, frankly, years behind. And we talked about it at the Institute. One of the big fears here is this education gap, right? Like if you are and just because Aaron was one of our presenters from Northville, um, so you have a district like Northville that is a good district, a good community, has a lot of educated parents and community members. And so they have a lot going for it. And now they're embracing AI and moving quickly in a good direction where their kids can engage with it. And you could be sitting in another district that is maybe cautious for whatever reason. Maybe it is low income, so there's other struggles related to access, like other things that might slow a district down. And so then you worry about how far behind does one group of kids get from the other as that district is embracing AI and another for different reasons are not. So um, I think that really is um, something to grapple with, like as in essence you are as the governance bodies, in some ways the caretakers of the kids in your community. Like I don't think you can afford to completely wait for things to happen and be sorted out before you as a district engage. So, I think that's a thing to help deal with. I'm looking at other comments that are here. I'm glad. I mean, we have a small group on today, and yet we have a number of people saying that you're doing things, that you're getting updates, that you have task forces and committees. So I think that's impressive that we're having that. Um, I'm just looking back. Let's see, John. I'm looking at the idea of partnering small districts with large districts when developing a roll-up plan. Tools can be sampled at the small scale, supported by big districts, lessons learned. Yeah, I think what you'll see in that space, John, is, and particularly in small districts, is that the ISDs are probably going to have to come in the back and be the support. Josie, you have your hand up. I'll rather have somebody else talk than me.
Well, just for a minute. Yeah, I have two questions. So I did attend the Institute, but so did another trustee from Traverse City Area Public Schools. So we divided and conquered, and he attended that, particular session on Friday, and I did not. He was a huge fan of the session and reported out at our last board meeting. We've adopted the Troon policy on AI. But I guess my question is, how frequently do you and Brad in particular expect the Troon and or the Neola policies to be revised to keep up with things? Because that's what I'm really looking out for. We just have that very basic legal framework right now in place, and our district, not our board, is, like they're having ongoing conversations about AI, the administration and staff. So one is just that legal question, because I think that's really when it's going to come to the board again. Secondly, though, the equity issue. My district is board and administration. We're going into our next strategic plan. We're really focusing on lifting all boats with academic achievement, but in particular also closing that achievement gap between our disadvantaged kids and our non-disadvantaged kids. And AI is like being promoted as a tool that's going to close the gap. I'm personally a little wary about that promise not being fulfilled, in part because when it comes to the home life, it just could exacerbate that gap again. So I know those are two. Hopefully that first question is very quick and easy for you, Brad, but the second question is a bigger issue.
I'll let you go first, Brad. I can tackle the second one.
Okay. So, Josie, I think Neola and True and other policy providers are going to keep the policies very broad at this point before, until we're able to really pinpoint, what the specific legal issues are going to be. Now, I identified some very broad issues, but I'll give you an example of a broad policy that can be enforced, but it's not going to be specific enough to the point where you have, direct, guidance from that policy, and that would be protecting, student data and student privacy. Your broad policy probably makes mention of that, but let's say you're using an AI tool, and this example came up in the meeting yesterday. You're using an AI tool that is takes notes for a meeting. Seems like a great idea, right? But when someone uses that tool within a group within a school district and uses it at its default function without knowing, what that is going to attach to and what data it's going to collect as part of that default function, and then how every time it's used, it's going to launch again and collect more data. And at some point, you lose control as far as what data that is being collected from that note-taking tool. And this school district determined that they had to block that tool, because based on their policy, they couldn't ensure that every person that was going to use it was going to go in and adjust the default mechanisms to ensure that it wasn't mining for that type of data that it was going to use, for its own purposes to make revenue. So that's just an example of issues you have to be careful of and how your policies would come into play. So the district was following its policy, ensuring that it wasn't going to be disclosing any student data, student privacy information. But that policy didn't specifically say you have to block, all AI note-taking tools.
Yeah, and I think to what Brad was just getting at too, and what people have said in the chat, when we think about vetting and listing software that is good to use and a quality vendor, that is one of the things that has to be considered as well. And Brooke from Linden mentioned it. Like, you have to think about it not from just a academic perspective, but like, does the software have the safeguards in place? Like, there's a number of softwares out there now, depending on what you're working on. But like, if we think of some of the big, like Microsoft Copilot, for example, if you have the um, basic version of that, you have Copilot in your software, that will be going out to the internet. You'll be answering the questions, and the data that you enter into it will also end up as part of its learning model. If you have the enterprise model of that, where you're of course paying a different licensing fee, you can set it at the enterprise level, so at the district level, so that your data can't go back out. And so you have to make sure that the vendors that you're working with have some of those safeguards put in place. So that's another piece of this as we think about software. To your second question, Josie, on equity, I think, of course, there is no panacea, right? Like, you can't fix AI is not going to fix equity in the scope of things. But I will tell you, and it would have been, because that your question is so spot on with Aaron Bauman's presentation at the conference. And he's now an educator on loan to Michigan virtual from Northville. I would say, if as your board is engaging in this conversation, it might be worth your while to bring Aaron up to talk to him, because it's part of and he said it in his presentation, like, he was about to retire from education and he made a choice not to, because he sees AI as the possibility for the great equalizer as it comes to equity, as a student that came out of extreme poverty. And, he talked about different software programs that allow a teacher, like right now, if you have a classroom of 30 people, and we know we have kids at all of the academic levels of that, and generally you're handing them all the same assignment. So if one doesn't read as well, like they're going to struggle with the assignment. Somebody else that reads really well, it's going to be really like and to try to differentiate in that space, or maybe it's how difficult the text itself is. Maybe it's written at a 10th grade level and you have somebody that's reading at the 6th grade level. How are they going to take that? And you can't differentiate as a teacher with software that he like showed us right online during the presentation. That teacher can go in and with a few strokes of a key, like change all of that. So the kid that needs the reading is getting the same assignment, but at the 6th grade reading level. So they can still do the work and get to where they need to. And also the kid that's at the, college level reading is getting a more difficult text, but they're talking about the same topic so they can interact in the class. They're not singled out. Like it was amazing. And somebody asked the question in here earlier about foreign language. And the same thing, like with the stroke of a pen or a stroke of a keyboard, I guess, they're able to change it and be like, oh, this person is an English language learner. And so many of these software, like 52 languages, that assignment now is going to go to you in a different language. It can read it to you. You could read it. Like, I mean, the versatility and the quickness and speed by which teachers can do these manipulations of the assignments through software was kind of mind blowing. So I think it is not going to fix everything. Like if you don't have certain access, that's still going to be an issue. But at what you can control, right? At the district, what your kids are doing when they're in the butts in the seats in your school district, this really does offer teachers an incredible opportunity to be getting to those kids that have some of the largest struggles and help get them materials and teaching that is much more um, at their level that they need to learn from. And Aaron, like, is very engaged. He's a curriculum director by trade, but this is what's driving him now is this idea that he thinks equity could really be impacted by that as well. So I just encourage you to possibly reach out and talk to him. I'm looking to
Yep.
follow up
Thanks
on
so much,
questions.
Don. Thank you. And
You're
Brad.
welcome. Let's see, Amy. Amy, I like your, I mean, I won't say I like your comment, but I appreciate your comment and saying that, the teachers have shared what they're using, but your board is not privy. And so, like, I think in that case, right, this is one of those places we always say at MASB, it's a board's role to ask questions. And so I think it's completely appropriate to ask, could, a group of teachers, a task force chair, a curriculum director present to the board about what's happening with AI and give us demonstrations so that we are comfortable. Because in the end, when you're walking through the grocery store and the parent comes up to you and either wants to rave about something or complain about something, I tell superintendents all the time, don't ever make a board member look stupid. Because that's going to be a problem. But if the board members or if the superintendent's making sure you stay informed, you're going to be able to answer those questions of that parent that's asking or point them in the right direction. If your answer is, I don't know because the superintendent has never talked to us about it, that's not a good place for a board to be. And so I think it invites hey, just where are we at? It's not the board trying to get into a place they don't belong. It is just simply asking for the superintendent to make sure you're updated on things. So I actually appreciate that you mentioned that. And I see there and at the end that you plan to have an AI discussed at your next meeting.
Yeah, Don, if I can comment
Yeah.
that's why I was very thankful that there was more than one of us at the Spring Institute and that this workshop was available. Honestly, in my own personal opinion, I feel doing it again would benefit because I'm sure word of mouth we're actually sharing, in other MASB networking that we're all, sharing with each other. Oh, you should have been there. Oh, it was so beneficial, all that information. Honestly, I think it would be a hit again. So I appreciate that it gave us the opportunity so that we do know what questions to ask.
I appreciate that, Amy.
Thank
Um,
you.
uh, Kirk, to your question about what's planned next for MASB, I am anticipating there will likely be some clinic sessions on AI at the conference in the fall. One of the topics that I know we have a speaker on isn't specific to AI, but it is on innovation because one of the struggles, and this is going to fall into the lap of boards, and I sit, as Brad sits on the legal and policy, I sit on the communications committee related to AI with Michigan Virtual and others. And the issue that I see for school boards is like many innovations that come through school districts, I don't care if it's new math or AI or something else, you will get pushback from parents and how you communicate how you're using this in your districts and with your community is going to be a big deal. And so we're trying to lift up just that whole innovation because it's not just AI, right? It's outcomes based educations. It's AI. It is different methods of teaching, different like I think of districts that change their elementary school buildings, right? And they go from being a K3 to a K6 or a 5, 6, like all of those changes when you're trying to innovate can cause pushback from parents. And those districts that have success in it, it's about how you communicate and how do you make sure that that your community is brought along. And so we will have a conversation and one of our main speakers on innovation. And I appreciate what Amy said about, could we do this as a repeat? We had roughly 180 people attend the Institute, which is a good number, but we have 4,200 members. So I do think that will be a conversation that we have to lift up. We don't have any plans in CBAs right now, Kurt, just because it's too new and it's also right now like it's still kind of, I won't say unclear, but what the board role in AI is, like that piece, I think is still, we have to sort that out, both internally and in conversations with board members to figure out what does that look like? Does it ever get to a point of a class? Or do we do some, short webinars with people? Somebody mentioned in the chat, I had Justin, one of the presenters from the Institute on my podcast shortly after the Institute to talk about AI. So we are going to continue to lift it up in those kind of spaces as well. And if you guys have ideas of where we can be helpful in AI, in whether it be in sessions or in topics, and some of you have posted that, just let us know. Let's see, what is the future potential? Yeah, Kurt, that's a great question. I like when you talk about the impact of AI on standardized tests. I mean, if you think about, I think it is NWEA right now, and I don't know that it's AI per se, maybe in an early form, but unlike the SAT that has a set of questions that a kid takes and they finish it and they're done. If you're taking NWEA, like it continues to ask new questions at harder levels until they've reached, and so at some point it's learning not like AI does like ChatGPT, but it's learning what level the kid is at until it hits a set of questions the kid can't answer. And then it drops back down. And when they feel like, oh, that's the level, that's part of how the assessment happens on standardized testing. So, like for that particular one. Um, and you mentioned accommodations. That was something else that Aaron brought up is that in the special education space, that AI has some real possibilities as well that are out there functioning. So I see Larissa posted the podcast that we did on AI. Um, Crystal, thanks so much. Appreciate that. Mary Beth, good question. I am not even like a half of 1% of knowledge on AI. So I just know they were talking, like when he talked about it, they were talking about how a lot of the software programs can input things or get input, like an assignment that a teacher develops, and it will change it into varying languages so that kids can hear it spoken to them. They can have it in a different language written for them. He didn't get into much related to the actual teaching of foreign language. It was more about how do we help our ELL students by giving them text that can be more easily understood to move them along through the process. Um, so sorry that we can't be more helpful there. If anybody else on the call has knowledge there, I'd encourage you to post that. Oh, good, Jen. They asked a question about the budget. I can quit. You can add. Kurt asked about the Senate budget.
I got nothing. Um, the Senate has passed their budget. It's sitting in the House. The House has not put out their budget yet. We don't expect their budget until the beginning of June. So we still don't have three proposals that you can look at. The House budget, I think, spends a lot more money, or the Senate budget spends more money than I think we actually have. With the Consensus Revenue Estimating Conference, the numbers came back positive for the school aid fund, that we're not going to see much of a dip. It's about a 2% increase, which is about what we expected. The general fund, however, is looking at $1 billion hole from January. So it's not a hole, $1 billion less revenue than we expected for next year. But then what all of the economists kept saying was this is based on first quarter consumer behavior. And you had a lot of panic buying. You're still having panic buying before tariffs take place. So that would have kept those numbers up. We have not seen the effect of the tariffs because they went into effect in May. So we won't see the effect of those until the third quarter. Some people are calling for another consensus revenue estimating conference after the third quarter or during the third quarter to see where our numbers are really at. So even though they were positive, they still give us pause. The other issue that we have is that they're still trying to find, the legislature is still trying to find $3 billion to fix the roads. And now we see that the general fund has less funds and the school aid fund has more funds. And we all know what happens then. So we have been fighting again, rumors of more university funding going into the school aid fund. There is the resolution, SJRH, that Representative Kelly introduced that would put that on the ballot to stop it. And we had heard a lot of positive response from the Republican caucus in the House that they don't want university funding in the school aid fund. The problem is we're hearing from leadership in the House that they're perfectly fine with it, and they've got to figure out how to pay for these roads. The other thing that is still not included in either the governor's proposal or the Senate proposal is any potential federal cuts. We're hearing meals is off the table at the federal level, but that would have been a $900 million cut to the state for the school aid fund. The other big piece is Medicaid. And as long as they're talking about Medicaid cuts of any kind, we're at risk. And Michigan gets $160 million in Medicaid money just for schools, and $149 million of that goes to special ed. We're also hearing there could be cuts to title funds, especially for English language learners. So if these things start to happen at the federal level, on top of an economy that could head into a recession by the end of this year or next year, these budgets that are out in front of you today are fake. The numbers won't hold up. So the problem we have right now, the biggest problem we have right now is the House hasn't put anything out. So there's no negotiation happening right now. We continue to push for a June 30th date and encourage all of you to make sure everyone understands why June 30th matters, that it's not just a date on the calendar. You've got a lot of people that still don't understand that or just think schools will be fine, it's okay. We had heard that the House was willing to do the budget before June 30th to do the school aid budget on its own. There was a lot of pushback from the Senate in doing that. We've heard that some of that has softened. But while we would love for you all to have a budget to plan on, there are some dangers in them passing the school aid budget without the general fund. So we're trying to juggle all of these things and figure out what exactly is going on. But that's a long way to say, I got nothing. Until we see what the House is going to put out. We're hearing the House is going to put out a giant per pupil, but at the expense of other things. So we're just working on rumors out of the House right now. And as time, ticks away, we get more and more worried about this June 30th deadline. And there is no way the general fund budget will be done by then. It's just not going to be possible. They haven't negotiated on roads. They haven't put out a general fund budget in the House. So we're kind of at this odd standstill. And I would encourage you all to make sure that standstill is not okay with all of you. Make sure they know that. And as you're going into your budgeting over the next month, to be conservative, because I don't even know what to tell you to bank on as a per pupil. And I know some questions popped up as I was going about some of this stuff. So let me go back and look. So there is school aid, school infrastructure. There's a school infrastructure fund. It's got something like $400 million in it. I think they started that fund 2 budget cycles ago, and they've never put a penny out from it. We are hearing, because the statewide school facility study came out, that we will see some money come out of it. We have been asking for that from the beginning. We were very excited to see that the state was actually going to pony up some money for infrastructure, because we are one of only 7 states that doesn't. But we haven't seen anything come out of that fund. The Senate proposal does use some of that money for roofs and HVAC. So districts that would have those 2 as their major priority and are in areas that have not been able to pass a millage or can't pass a millage large enough, they would get priority. But that is the only infrastructure appropriation we've seen so far. But that is something we talk about every time we're in the offices, is this money is just sitting there. If we're not going to use it for infrastructure, then free it up for something else. But we really need to get that money flowing. It is so far from the $23 billion that we need across the state, but at least it would be a step in the right direction. Mental health investments. So the safety and school mental health line, as you all are painfully aware, was slashed last year. This will come back this year for certain. The House has said they want $350 million. Camilleri wasn't far off of that, but he only has $75 million that would continue into the next year. So there will be a decent amount of money in 31AA this year. The Republicans cannot have a budget without it. So I don't know what that final number will be, but I wouldn't be surprised if it stays around that $300 million amount. Nice question, Mike. Have they sent a ransom note? I would say kind of. They passed what they call the stopgap budget back in March. And it funded what they deemed essential services across the state. It left $10 billion, $5 billion on, I think it's $5 billion on the balance sheet for the school aid fund. And that's what the Democrats focused on. The messaging around what the Republicans were trying to do was terrible. And so it looked like they passed a budget that was $5 billion short of what you're used to getting. Their point was, we're going to pass this budget. It has the basics in it. So for school aid, it had the per pupil, school safety, MIPSers, special ed, and a couple other things. It was missing at risk, which they admitted was a mistake, not on purpose. But their goal, their thought was, we'll pass this, we'll get that set for schools to be able to move forward, and then we'll come back and finish the budget. The Senate was having none of it. The House Dems were having none of it. And so I would say that's probably as close to a ransom note as we've seen, but that sits dead in the Senate. It's going to be a full budget or nothing. The Senate's not going to pass a partial budget. The status of U.S. Resolution 833 at this point, the reason we have called that to your attention is because the president has put it in his federal budget proposal This would create a federal voucher program based on federal tax returns and would use federal tax money. The resolution itself was not necessarily the problem. The problem, well, it exists, that's a problem. The problem is that the president has called for that within his budget. But just like the state, the president makes a budget, the Congress has to deal with it. They still have to finish budget reconciliation to get through this year, let alone talk about next year. But that's why we flagged that for you. We will certainly be keeping an eye on it. But the bigger threat right now is if it becomes part of the budget. Money for nurse and social worker grants. If this is a different section, if it's not the 31A, it might be 31N that you're talking about here. I don't know at this point. We've heard things that the House is going to roll up a bunch of the categoricals into your per pupil, so it wouldn't be there specifically. If you're talking about 31N, that section for nurses and social worker grants, that allows a federal Medicaid pull down so that we can pull down more dollars. So if that is rolled up, we will fight to get that back out so that we can continue to pull down those Medicaid dollars. But until we see what they're going to do and what they like in writing, it's hard to give you any idea because all we're working on are rumors. And then it switches to Brad. So I will turn it over to Brad.
Yeah, lots of lawsuits, Kurt, and most of those are at the injunction stage, where injunctions have been issued to restrict the enforcement of the executive orders in terms of enforcing them, to take away federal funding. I guess the most significant one as of late was the executive order relating to Title VI and DEI programs. There were 3 separate court cases, might even been 4. Yeah, there are 4 court cases on that issue now, and the executive department has been issued a court order restricting enforcement of the Dear Colleague letters and the executive order as specific to DEI programs because of the broadness of those guidance documents and the executive order kind of restricting the speech of teachers in terms of classroom instruction and just not really putting districts on notice of what could constitute a violation of Title VI. The issue that's still pending out there, where you see a lot of OCR complaints being investigated, is the issue of transgender athletes participating in the sport of their identified gender. There's been a number of states that have been filed a complaint has been filed against them, and now the Department of Justice is kind of working through that complaint, and there's likely going to be federal penalties issued in those cases, and then those penalties will be appealed to the courts, and the courts will have to sort all of that out. So yeah, lots of litigation in the federal space. One case to keep an eye on, I made note of this today, that's going to provide Michigan districts with a lot more clarity on the Title IX issue and how it applies to restroom and locker room usage, is the case of Doe versus Bethel Local School District Board of Education. This case originated from Ohio, currently pending before the Sixth Circuit, which applies to Michigan. The Sixth Circuit heard oral arguments on this case in October, so there should be a decision issued in the very near future. And this is the facts in this case very similar to what we've heard in other districts. You had a middle school student that was using a single-use restroom in middle school as a transgender student, then went to high school, wanted to use the community restroom of their identified gender. The district agreed to that, and then there were complaints filed against the school district and lawsuits, and the district court supported the district's policy on allowing the transgender student to use the restroom of their identified gender. And now this case is pending before the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. So we will take, the outcome of that case for further guidance on this issue, because right now, it's a major issue as far as how the executive department is interpreting Title IX. So just wanted to give everyone a heads up on that case. Hopefully, we'll get a decision within the next couple weeks.
Thanks for that, Brad. I wanted to follow up on Jen's legislative comment, particularly the last one on 833. It's not that often that we're putting out information related to federal legislation, and Jen has in recent weeks, because we've gotten, Kurt, you mentioned it in the question to Brad, Medicaid cuts, which aren't executive order, but a part of the kind of solution that's being considered in the House. And so we are sending out alerts on that. And the difficulty, and I had a board member, it actually was a superintendent, not a board member, that was saying, can you give me the bill number? And 833 is similar in that once it gets into a budget reconciliation process, the bill number that might have been assigned to whatever it was disappears, or in some instances, there never was. It's just a conversation about a topic. And like, there's not a bill that we can refer you to on Medicaid cuts. It is the reconciliation process itself. And for I think for even school people on Medicaid particularly, it is not that we are just having a conversation at MASB about the importance of Medicaid for poor families. It is Michigan is one of the leading states in drawing down Medicaid funds to help school districts offset medical costs that you're providing to students that are have high medical needs within your districts related to special ed and other areas. And so it really impacts your general fund. And you can talk to your business manager about how much money are you drawing down at your local district for Medicaid. And that is where it's in jeopardy. And hence the reason that you're seeing more from Jen on Medicaid and on vouchers at the federal level, because there's just a lot right now in this conversation that would be harmful for Michigan school districts. And so it's just something that we're trying to lift up. And it's harder to have you call your member of Congress, although we want you to, because you need to be able to talk about the program, not like a specific House bill, House resolution. It is like, we don't want to see Medicaid cuts. We don't want to see, vouchers, or however you communicate that. But it's not as easy as just saying vote no on this bill. And I just wanted to lift that up too. Michelle's question: are there ways the districts can support each other against EOs, similar to how universities have banded together? That's a good question, Michelle. I think that because of the risk and the cost related to litigation, you're likely not going to see. The budget at I'll just say University of Michigan, although I don't know that they're engaged in litigation, but or fighting back. But the budget size of that and their legal teams versus a local district are just so extreme. And so we are seeing some universities, and of course, Harvard is probably the most prominent one that's fighting back on some of the EOs. I don't know. I think what you're going to see is what we're seeing in other states and in Michigan, and I know Jen shared the link, is what you're seeing there is state attorney generals speaking up on behalf of the public entities in their states and legally taking action. And that's what I think we're seeing across the country in certain states. I don't expect to see, very few school districts, probably no school district, really has the wherewithal to try to take on a case and move it through. And even when Brad, the EOs that he mentioned, those were often put in place, like unions representing employees filed many of those cases. So that becomes a part of it, because I have not heard of anything else where districts are kind of coming together like you're talking about with the universities.
Well, Don, if there's any local litigation on that issue, so eventually we're going to see a case that pits Title IX against our Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act. And if a school district is involved in that issue, whether it involves a restroom or participation in athletics, They can make a request to the MASB Legal Trust Fund to assist with the legal expenses relating to that case. And then MASB may be able to participate as an amicus curiae in that issue as well. So that would be one way, for the state association to support a local school district involved in that type of matter.
Well, and Brad, you just because I was looking at our member survey and kind of from an awareness. So Brad said our Michigan Legal Trust Fund. And so if you're unaware, I'm going to share what that is, particularly for new board members. So school districts in Michigan have an opportunity when we invoice for dues for MASB, which are actually hitting your districts in the next couple of weeks here, along with MASB dues, is we have years ago, how old is it, Brad, the Legal Trust Fund?
Oh, it is probably over 40, I think. So,
Yeah, I was thinking
yeah,
pushing
40 years.
50 years. So
Yeah, yeah.
our board of directors nearly 50 years ago made a decision that it was important to have a trust fund that people can contribute to take on and help assist districts on court cases that have statewide impact. And so if you have and Larissa just posted 1975, and so it is 50 years.
Yeah.
So if a district is in litigation and it has the case will have statewide impact. They can apply to the legal trust fund, which has its own separate board, and Brad is the staff person that oversees that process. And that case is Brad brings it before that board to say, will it assist in the legal costs for the school district? Usually up to half, up to a dollar amount cap or something like that. And even if so many of your districts actually participate, you might not even know it, but you are members of the trust fund. And even if you're not, there are still mechanisms to actually apply to our board of directors to be able to get assistance. So it has been used in, I don't know, maybe we're well north of in 50 years, I would say hundreds of cases over the years, because it's not always just court cases, it can be administrative processes as well. But it is something that is available for school districts. And we have to do a better job based on looking at the member survey of lifting up awareness on that, because people are not aware that it exists. But it is a tool out there.
Yeah, and the board of trustees is made up of board members. In fact, we have three board members. I think three on the call today. I see Josie, Shelley, and Stan. All three serve on the Legal Trust Fund.
And Mark is usually on here, and he's the chair this year.
Yes, yeah.
So I see that we are at 101, and we always try to honor your time and knowing that you're tuning in during lunch. Many of you are working, and so I know we had talked ahead of time, and Brad had a couple of issues he could have touched on, and we ended up going in different directions. So sorry that we didn't get to everything. But I would say, just appreciate again you being online and engaged with MASB. And please, if you think of things, we talked about AI, but if there are other topics that you are facing in your districts that are coming about, that you think MASB might be able to help and we're not doing something currently in the space, make sure you let us know. We really need to know what those issues are. I mentioned the survey earlier. Make sure that you're filling that out. But just appreciate what you do for our districts. Hopefully you're going into that good time of year right now where you get to honor kids and see them graduate. I know that's always a great time for school board members. So enjoy your spring, and thank you all very much for tuning in today.